Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Lyssa Lizards.
I'm Neptune Chameleon.
And we're your reptile girlies. How's your week been?
So far, so good.
Yeah, I mean,
we're past Monday.
It is only Tuesday, so
there's a lot that could go horribly wrong in the week, or really well.
This is very true.
Depends.
This is very true. You never really know.
Yeah. Are you a half glass full or half glass empty?
I'm pretty cynical. I have my positive moments. I do, but I'm a little cynical.
No, I'm a
you.
half glass full. Yeah. Well, that's what makes our friendship like so complimentary, though.
Because I need the positivity sometimes,
and I need just like to be slapped in the face with reality.
Yeah. You really do need that.
But sometimes, right? But then I'm like, hey, but what if this happens? Yeah. And then, that's why it works out.
I don't like to say that I'm a cynic. I like to say that I am a realist.
Yeah.
And I feel like you'd corroborate that, right?
Yeah. No. I would say you're a realist. Yeah. I would say I'm not like a crazy optimist, but I'm just like...
you err on the side of positivity, I feel
like look on the brighter side.
Yes.
But I can still see the darker side. I'm just...
Yes.
Picking the brighter side.
You choose to ignore it sometimes.
It's not there. Not gonna.
I mean, let's be honest. We all need to be a little bit delulu in life, but that's okay.
Oh, good. I think you're gonna be so excited for this episode, though. I'm
very excited.
Your jam.
This is absolutely my jam. I could talk about this stuff for hours.
If only we had a podcast.
If only we had a podcast
to talk about exactly this.
So, as you guys can obviously tell by the title, today we are going to be giving you tips and tricks for how to build a bioactive enclosure.
Which I feel like is like hot right now.
Honestly, it is. It
like
really is.
Like, not to say there's like trends necessarily in the hobby, but like there definitely are.
Trends,
And bioactive is like one of the big ones right now.
And I just find it super interesting because I started doing bioactive, I would say, 5 or 6 years ago. Definitely 5 years ago, maybe 6.
I'm in the same camp because Pluto's enclosure has been bioactive for the last like 4 or 5 years.
And I feel like back then when we started, it was something that was well known by people who were like deep into the reptile hobby.
Or with geckos. I feel like geckos and bioactive were like pretty...
I would even go as far as saying specifically New Caledonian geckos.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Like
that when I thought geckos, that's what I had in mind.
Yeah.
Like, but then like the more arid species, like snakes going bioactive, that was a big deal.
Yep.
Chameleons going bioactive, that's even a
bigger deal.
That's even more recent.
Like, is taboo the right word?
I'd say so.
It was very, and I think it probably has so much to do with like chameleons having the sticky tongues, potentially eating substrate. I feel like that was like a, issue when people would talk about it.
I think it was like a concern, but I think it's more having the enclosure type to do it because
that's fair.
What was taboo was using glass enclosures for chameleons.
Yes, that
because
makes
of the history of previously using aquariums and having health issues. But these are no longer aquariums; these are vertical glass terrariums, and so people kind of had to successfully keep them in glass, and they're like,
before introducing plants, which adds more humidity.
Yeah, and then the soil, and then it's like, okay, these are tree dwellers, but then why are we providing them soil so close to the bottom? But that's the space we have to work with. So then I would say chameleon bioactive enclosures really gained momentum in like the last 2 years.
No, I completely agree. I actually, when I had Barney, never did fully bioactive. He always had live plants, but I never went fully bioactive with him because nobody really had.
Well, and it's hard to do it in a screen enclosure, and only within about the last 2 years, we've had large PVC enclosures that are big enough to house chameleons. But maybe we should take a step back and just like bioactive 101.
Yep.
What is a bioactivity? What makes an enclosure bioactive? Like, what are the little check boxes you have to make it count?
In my opinion, there are 2 different routes, and this is, I promise I'm answering your question, but there's bioactive and then there's naturalistic.
Yep.
And
which we've talked about.
Yes. And that is something that, like, honestly, you can't go wrong either way. I think that if you're going to keep reptiles, you should be keeping them one of those 2 ways, in my opinion. But when it comes to naturalistic, what that is lacking in order to make it be bioactive is live plants and or a cleanup crew. So, and some people will have a naturalistic enclosure with live plants, but no cleanup crew. So
then it doesn't
it's
count.
not fully bioactive.
Yep.
Or some people will have an enclosure that is fully naturalistic, but it has fake plants, and it might even have a cleanup crew, but it doesn't have live plants.
So you have to have I would say 3 main things. You have to have substrate.
Yeah, loose substrate specifically.
Loose substrate. You have to have a cleanup crew, which to be clear are like the teeny tiny bugs, and we'll get into that.
Isopods and springtails.
And then live plants.
Yes.
Those are the three things.
Major components, yeah.
In addition, you would have things that for them to climb on, potentially branches and sticks of those types
Rocks,
of things. Like
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, more decor type climbing things.
There are also more like biodegradables that you can put in there that are also from nature. There's all kinds of additional accessories.
But if we're talking like, in order to qualify as bioactive, these are the minimums.
And just to answer your first initial question of what is bioactive, it is essentially supposed to be a self-sustaining ecosystem within an enclosure.
Yep.
And people actually will have bioactive terrariums that don't have an animal in it other than the isopods and the springtails. And they just keep live plants in the self-sustaining environment.
Yep.
And the plants thrive.
Yep.
So,
And technically there are live animals in there, right? Because you would have the isopods and stuff. Because I recently got a box of isopods and springtail shipped to me, and there was a big sticker that said live animals.
Yeah, technically they are live animals.
And little did my mailman know it was bugs.
It's always funny when you get bugs delivered and they're like, "What the heck is this?"
I feel so bad for my
your poor mailman.
I'm ordering
what crazy lady lives here.
Pounds and pounds of dirt. I'm ordering bugs. I'm ordering roaches. Like all kinds of I don't know, things for them, but
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, so that's essentially what makes it truly bioactive.
Yep.
And the reason we love doing this, the reason I love doing this is for 2 reasons. Number 1, it is the closest possible option that we can get to mimicking their natural environment.
Yep.
And number 2, it makes my life
so much easier.
So much easier.
Yeah.
It's like reptile keeping on easy mode. I mean, once you get to the point where you have everything set up automatically, you're misting, your humidity, the plants are thriving, the isopods are thriving. I mean, you barely have to do any cleaning.
The work up front is going to be exponentially more than if you were going naturalistic or even something more simple than that. But to your point, the sustainable piece of it, as long as you've got all your components working right, it's great. You won't be picking up poop nearly as much because you've got...
That's not without trial and error, which is what we're here to talk about today.
To talk about some tips. Yeah. I know we want to talk about like thinking of someone who is just wanting to get started with bioactive.
Yes.
They have their reptiles or they have interest in other species and like, I would love to go bioactive. Where do I start? So I know we want to talk about... some like different species and environments that maybe you want to start out with.
Yes. So first things first, if you have never done a bioactive enclosure, if you have never had loose substrate at all, if your reptile has never been on loose substrate, I'm specifically thinking like leopard geckos, bearded dragons, like...
And the reason we're bringing this up because there was the stigma, loose substrate is harmful, period. Right?
Loose
and so
substrate
this is why
will kill your reptile was like a stigma for a very, very long time that is not scientifically backed by any means.
But then you have people in the same, not the same sentence, but thought being like, but bioactive is okay. So as a new keeper, it's so confusing. Why is bioactive okay? Because technically that's loose substrate, but then having loose substrate isn't. And so what's missing are the other components, which is what you're getting to.
And specifically, so when it comes to like loose substrate, any loose substrate can be harmful if your husbandry is not on point.
And that's what's missing.
And that's what's missing. So when I say husbandry, I'm talking whether or not you're using UVB lighting, whether or not your calcium and vitamin supplement schedule is accurate, whether or not their diet is accurate, if their humidity levels are correct, and if you're using the proper overhead heating that you should be using.
Now, there will be serious health issues if any of those things are wrong.
Yeah.
But then you also add loose substrate into the equation, and that's when you're seeing health issues.
That's when it becomes a problem. And so with all of that said, the main thing I wanted to like really kick all of this off with is that if you are somebody who's never had a reptile on loose substrate before, do not jump right into bioactive without first ensuring that you are adding UVB if you don't have UVB, that you are moving from under the tank heating to overhead heating, and do all of that in a very sterile quarantine-ish setup first, and ensure that their diet, ensure that everything else is on point except for the like actual enclosure, like substrate and all of that.
Right.
Then once you have all of those lighting and heating and diet things all figured out, then you can make the switch over into bioactive, because then your reptile has already adjusted to the heating changes, the lighting changes, the diet changes, the supplement changes.
And that is a lot to try and take on.
It's a ton,
because if your temperatures are a couple degrees off, then you're like, how do I fix that? Your humidity levels from summer to winter are going to be different. You thought this was the correct supplement schedule, but then you found out what's a multivitamin, so like that's a lot for one single keeper to take on for each individual species that you're potentially keeping. And you want to talk about a cleanup crew? I was like, whew. Not to say it's not possible. You certainly can do that.
Totally.
But highest chance for success is going to be have that baseline foundation of your care. Yeah.
So once you get all those things figured out, then you can start getting into, okay, what are you going to start off with in your bioactive environment? And my number one suggestion is, if you have multiple reptile species and one of those reptiles is a more tropical or more like higher humidity needing species, specifically if you have crested geckos, if you have gargoyle geckos, any New Caledonian geckos, that is the first bioactive enclosure that I would recommend starting with.
They're so much easier to set up than like all the other species.
It's almost dummy proof. Like it truly, like,
so many things working for it. You have higher humidity levels, which are going to do great for the plants in the isopods and springtails. Typically, they're being kept in glass or PVC, which makes keeping that humidity and keeping that substrate way easier. You have an arboreal animal, so then they're not even trunching on your plants and your soil and everything else. Like, it's a lot easier to provide the overhead heating because you're working in a vertical enclosure that's got a screen top. Like, so many things.
Just all the pros in the world. Like,
which is a great way to get started.
Totally.
With getting into bioactive.
Yeah. So number one tip, start with a tropical species if you can, because specifically the arid bioactive enclosures are very tough to master
for basically the opposite reasons of what we just said.
Exactly. And like, so much so that like I am still having situations with my arid setups where the cleanup crew has died off, the plants are getting trampled by my skink at all times, like things like
how
that.
How do you provide overhead heating when you've got a closed top, right? Like, how do you fixate a heat bulb in it with
how do you ensure that the plants aren't getting like too dried out by the heat? It's just like, it's a nightmare. So arid bioactive enclosures are not for the faint of heart. So, those are a little bit more difficult. So it's just important to know that, in my opinion.
Yeah. So if we're kind of taking a step back then, right? You're like, hey, I'm going to do this. We've kind of alluded to this already, but the enclosure type can be a really great place to start, because you have basically the options of glass, PVC, or screen. Or
wood as well. Some people still use melamine enclosures and things like that.
No, so good call out. I would say the solid side, which I'll use so that you can fill in whatever you want with that. Solid side enclosures are going to be exponentially easier for a bioactive enclosure, not only for maintaining the proper humidity levels, but just physically keeping the dirt in the enclosure.
The screen situation, I don't even know. I mean, you recently did something like that.
My very first Chameleon bioactive enclosure in an XL ReptiBreeze screen enclosure. So that's a 2x2x4 all screen. The only thing that's PVC is the bottom floor, which isn't even solid.
Y'all should see our text from when she was setting all of this up, because it was so funny. She was like, okay, I think I've got this pond liner and I think it's going to work to hold in all the substrate. What do you think? Like, we were just problem solving for the screen enclosure. Yeah, because I basically
had to keep the top half of the enclosure screen for proper ventilation. My humidity in the reptile room is already pretty high, so I don't need to be enclosing the sides. You don't need extra
humidity.
No. And then, but I need the bottom to be solid, because we're also dealing with drainage, right, in the water. So I can't just have a bucket full of dirt in there, because then the water is going to go down the sides. And so it's a little bit harder to problem solve for.
A lot harder.
So which is why I'm like, hey, if you're getting into bioactive, that would not be my first recommendation.
Definitely
PVC
not.
and screen, or PVC and glass or wood.
I do want to add a caveat, because this is something that I am currently doing in my new reptile enclosures that I've been working on. When we say PVC, there are different types of PVC enclosures. So there are the types of PVC enclosures that are essentially waterproof, where they're built. It's usually the custom made ones. And I have 2 of those. And those you don't have to worry about really waterproofing because they're completely, what's the word? Like encased. Sealed. Yeah. And so, however, with a lot of the more cost effective PVC enclosures that we're seeing come out, those ones that you can build and put together yourself, those ones are not waterproof.
Because they don't have the sealant between there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what I'm doing and what I've talked to like a lot of other reptile keepers do when you get these other enclosures that are still PVC is essentially siliconing. So taking 100%, aquarium safe, animal safe silicone and siliconing the bottom of those enclosures to essentially make it sealed or waterproof.
So then things like teeny tiny little isopods don't go through the cracks. Substrate gets through there. Water gets through there. Whatever, especially, with Kermit, who's going to have a very damp, moist enclosure. You don't need that oozing out the sides.
Tarzan's future enclosure, these. So obviously, like we said, kind of start with the tropical species, but be aware that a tropical species does mean that it needs to be watertight. It needs to be fully sealed off. So that's something I just wanted to make sure to mention.
Absolutely.
As those enclosures are getting more and more popular, that's something people need to know.
And then the next thing that we're kind of working towards is, and we're assuming that your UVB and your light and all that is like on point, but
and plant LED lighting. Is a must. You cannot.
Yes, we'll get into the plants. That one is a make or breaker. But what I love seeing is like the what is it? Not diaphragms. Diagrams. There we go.
Diagrams.
That's not
diaphragms.
Right. I'm like, that's a body part.
That's a body part.
Diagrams where it shows the different layers of a bioactive enclosure, and it just is so pleasing to see. It looks like a little sandwich.
I know. I love it.
Of all the different.
It's very aesthetically pleasing.
All the different layers. So if we're working top down, or should we go bottom?
Let's go bottom up.
Bottom up. Okay, so at this point, you've got your sealed.
You've got your enclosures all sealed off. It's siliconed off, or it's already sealed, and you're good to go. The very first thing you need to understand is whether or not you need a drainage layer.
Yes, and that is for the water, because most enclosures are going to need some sort of water sprayer, mister, humidity, whatever. And if we're talking those more tropical species, this is essential part of it. If we're talking chameleons where you're misting 2 to 4 minutes twice a day, like that is a huge element when it comes to your enclosures is the drainage.
And we've talked about this in our budgeting, cost effective episode. You can always hand mist, but a lot of the times in these situations, most people are using automatic misting systems.
And if you just had substrate or dirt on there,
it would
and then you're
soaked.
Just spraying it with water and it doesn't have enough time to dry out between the mistings, you're just end up with a muddy mess at the bottom of your enclosure.
I've been there. It's not fun. Don't do it.
So having this drainage layer helps allow for the water to drain, it's in the name, and then allow that soil to not become a muddy mess.
Most of the time what people are using are things like, some people use, lava rocks. There's all different kinds of drainage layers that you can do. My personal favorite is leca, which people also use for plant substrate as well, but it is essentially like clay
Are those
balls.
The same thing as hydro balls?
Yes. It's the same thing. Yes.
You just said the cool kid name for it.
I'm also an avid houseplant girly. And
I know, you should see her houseplants. She has little hydro balls all in there. And I'm like, okay, tell me you know what you're doing without telling me you know what you're doing.
I'm trying.
They look fabulous.
All the plant people call it leca. So it's hydro balls, clay.
Reptile people call it so it's hydro balls.
It's all the different things. So there's
thing. Yep.
Lots of different ones. The hydro balls are usually more expensive than the plant stuff, which is also why I'm saying that, because the
tip from the pro.
Check out my storefront. That's all in there. But basically that drainage layer is super, super important. Yep. And then immediately following that, you really don't want your actual substrate or the actual dirt layer falling into that drainage layer, because you want those draining elements, the hydroballs, whatever you're using, to be soaking up all of that water and then redispersing it through the soil or the substrate. And so in order to do that, you need to have like a layer of mesh.
Also, too, the either you say leca, leca, hydro balls, lava rocks, whatever, are going to have gaps in them because there's going to be spaces for the water to drain. And if you don't have that mesh, then your dirt is going to fall in those gaps. And so then the drainage layer is not able to actually keep that soil dry or whatever moisture temperature.
You phrased that way better than I did. Thank you.
So you have to have that mesh layer. Now, we do want to call out, there are some professional substrates out there that do not require having a formal drainage layer because the substrate is built in a way there's elements put into the substrate.
It's essentially self-draining because it's such a chunky substrate that it kind of self-drains a little bit.
So it's important when you're also researching your substrates, which maybe is what we can get into next, that you're understanding if you have to manually provide a drainage layer, or is it something, if you have a deep enough substrate layer, that you can kind of do it
handle
itself.
It for you. Yeah, exactly. Great
also, your water requirements, right? Because if you're doing something that's like lots of water, then maybe you still need to provide drainage on top of self-draining
That's
substrate.
usually, I would say that's usually more the case. Like if it's just a really high tropical, high humidity species, you almost always have to have a drainage layer regardless.
So I did not put a formal drainage layer in my Chameleon enclosure. That is just probably a good 12 inches of...
Which is a very big, deep substrate layer.
Yeah.
So you should be perfectly
fine.
I
did that intentionally for this reason. Because if I just did 6 inches of substrate or 4 inches of substrate or whatever, and I'm misting...
As much as you're misting,
then that poor substrate doesn't stand a chance. So, but I intentionally picked a substrate that, in theory, time will tell, is self-draining, and I made it be a substantial, thick layer so that it has that ability to do that.
Plenty of room to drain.
Yeah. So do you want to get into, I know in our ways for saving money, we talked about DIY substrate mixtures, but I think for our newbies, we might actually recommend going the professional route.
Yeah. So that's something I did want to talk about. It's the DIY mixes are amazing and it is a great budget friendly way to go. However, it can be a little bit less foolproof because it's just something that you're going to have to kind of, it usually takes a lot of trial and error to find the exact mix that you like and
the ratios
and the ratios and making sure that like it's draining properly. Is it not, this and that? Like, I just personally think that if you're a new keeper, there are so many professional reptile brands out there that have bioactive substrate that is meant for this exact purpose.
Yep.
And all you have to do is provide the drainage layer, dump in the pre-approved substrate, and it just makes your very first time doing a bioactive
you want to set
enclosure
yourself up for success. And is it going to be more expensive? Absolutely. But if you're just getting started, then maybe that's worth it to do that.
And then maybe your second or third one, you can try the DIY mixes and give that a shot. You know, it's just, I just think that if you're really starting out, it makes it so much easier to just
and
go
with
that
the professional mixes, there are different types of professional mixes, and you'll see pretty much every reptile brand at this point has some sort of substrate mix. So look at the different ingredients. I don't know. Is that
they are ingredients? I mean,
is that the right word?
Yeah.
In their substrate mixes, and like do your research a little bit on the different types. For like a more arid species is going to require something different than something more tropical, something that's burrowing.
All mixes are not created equal.
Yeah. Yeah. So do a little homework of like understanding if you are going the professional substrate route, that you're picking one that is best suited for your environment and your species.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. So after the substrate layer, the next layer is going to be your leaf litter layer.
Yep.
And that is something we've also talked about. You can literally find your own leaves outside and boil them and dry them out and make your own leaf litter.
Yes, which neither of us have actually done.
True. But it is something I will be trying for
and
these new
other
ones.
people have done and have raved about with great success. You can also just purchase leaf litter. There's also different types of leaf litter, smaller leaves, bigger leaves, all that.
This layer in the little aesthetically pleasing sandwich we discussed.
I know, we need like a whiteboard.
I know.
Like
I'm finding myself wanting to draw this out. But, you know, you go from your drainage layer to your mesh layer to your substrate layer to your leaf litter layer. And leaf litter is also where you would find other things that are called, you know, biodegradables. They are things that can biodegrade into the soil, into the substrate, and help add benefit to your cleanup crew, any, you know, natural cyanobacteria that's happening in there, all of that kind of stuff. And those things are all kinds of fun stuff, like nut pods or seed pods that look almost Jurassic. I mean, it's so cool.
I have not seen those.
You haven't seen those?
No.
Oh, they're so cool.
Or maybe I've seen them and did not know that's what it was.
Yeah, it probably, yeah. I know you've seen them before. We've seen them at expos together for sure. But they're just these like funky little pieces that add a lot of like character. So these are what I would just consider like the accessories, but they would go in kind of this leaf litter area.
Layer.
Yeah.
I've also heard of people recommending putting some leaf litter mixed in to your substrate. And this is so the isopods can like, they'll eventually munch on the leaf litter. And so then on a semi-regular, but you would replace your leaf litter as needed.
And the reason for that, like you just said, the cleanup crew eats away at them, stuff like that, and that is biodegrading. So eventually all of your leaf litter will biodegrade, and you do need to kind of always,
so having it mixed in there with the substrate, in addition to having like a top layer, is good for the little guys. So, and we'll circle back on the cleanup crew, but the next thing we have are the live plants.
Yes, which that's a whole segment of this.
and we should probably do a full episode just on
reptile plants.
Yeah. But in order for it to be bioactive, they do have to be live plants. Yes. You could supplement in with fake plants. Honestly, if you wanted.
That's an really important thing to note. You can combine live plants with real plants just for the coverage. Yeah. Because you know, live plants, sometimes it takes a while for them to grow in. And in the meantime, just put some fake plants in there, you know, add to it. And that doesn't make it not bioactive.
But you do have to have some live plants in order for it to count.
Exactly.
And that's only if you care about that, right? It's more what's important for your animal to make sure they have coverage and feel safe and all that. But having the live plants, and the beauty of bioactive is you can plant the plants directly into the substrate. Most chameleon keepers don't have that luxury because we're not using substrate on the bottom. So then you have to have these chunky potted live plants. And then some chameleons are eating the dirt. So you have to cover it with like large river rocks and it's a whole thing. So what's really cool is the ability to just plant them directly into the substrate.
Totally.
Which I've done. And what was another thing of why I wanted such deep substrate, because I'm picking monsteras and umbrella trees, big roots. Yeah. And so they need something to kind of anchor them in there.
That's an important note too. When you're looking into live plants, look at how big their root systems are, things like that. And then calling myself out here just a little bit. When it comes to plants, do your research on what plants are going to do best in that environment. Yes. This dummy right here, me, in one of my bioactive enclosures years ago, I posted, it was in my very early days on TikTok, I upgraded my former Uroplatus fimbriatus, which is a giant leaf-tailed gecko, which is a very high humidity species. I put a ZZ plant in there like an idiot.
What? I have ZZ plants in my chameleon enclosures, and they do fine.
With Uroplatus, it's pretty much near constant, like 80% humidity.
Okay, that's deep.
It was not,
and
I got called out so bad in the comments, like, that's a ZZ plant that's not going to thrive in there. You might want to fix that. It's like, great.
No, you have to be thoughtful also where you place them.
100%.
And this is especially true when you're working with vertical enclosures, because you're going to have heavy lighting at the top, and then you have little to no lighting at the bottom. So if you're picking a species of plant that needs lots of light and you plant it at the bottom directly in the soil,
not gonna thrive.
It's not going to make it. Just like if you take a low light plant and put it towards the top, it's not going to make it. So I actually went ahead on my website, neptunethechameleon.com. I have a plant section, and I broke it down by top of the enclosure, middle of the enclosure, and bottom of the enclosure.
So handy.
So that keepers can know, like, okay, I need something for the bottom, great, put a monstera. I need something for the top, great, put in this middle spot. Put in this, because you need that trial and error. Totally. And when you're first getting to bioactive, you want to set yourself up for success. So don't deviate from the tried and true plants, at least initially. You're going to eventually graduate to the more novelty plants, or the harder to keep plants. But stick with the pothos, stick with your monsteras, stick with your stuff that is going to do well. Gain the confidence.
For pro tip, for arid environments, ponytail plants are your best friend.
Those are so cute.
They're so cute. And they do so well. They hardly ever die. Like, it's... Right. Those are amazing.
By now, you guys know we're big fans of Pangea Reptile, and every month they come out with their different sales. For the month of May, they're coming out strong with their crested geckos on sale, including their lily whites.
you can't miss a lily white, guys. I'm literally still dying for one. So that's huge. But they're also even releasing some brand new isopods like the white shark, red panda, and blue pigeon isopods.
I have to check those out.
I've never even heard of those. They sound amazing. And their Memorial Day sale is going to be huge with some Pangea products, cork bark, all the Reptile Systems products, and more.
For all of our chameleon keepers out there, their Repti Breezes and T5 fixtures will be on sale. So be sure to take advantage. Head over to PangeaReptile.com and shop their sales.
Little PSA, because we are obviously dumping a ton of information.
This is so much information.
This is so much information, and we are aware that like the amount of research that even just goes into the freaking plants is a lot.
Yep.
So let me just throw out this little disclaimer. Just go for it. Do not be afraid. Do not be stuck in the research phase for so long out of fear. I see that in my DMs all the time. People are so afraid to just start. Just start, because you can learn as you go. And I am saying that as someone who did not research plants before just buying them and throwing them in. And I learned from trial and error.
It's either going to survive or it's going to die. That's how it goes.
It's the worst thing that'll happen is your plant dies.
Will be just fine.
Completely.
The plant, not so much.
Yeah.
But your animal will be just fine.
Yeah.
If you want to do a whole chameleon enclosure for both those plants, the entire thing, go for it.
Literally, that's what I did with my chameleon all the time.
There is nothing wrong with that. You are setting yourself up for success. Those pothos will thrive.
Yep.
You will gain confidence, and then throw in something else, and then throw in something else.
So it's just, I just don't want anybody to be afraid of just getting started because, like I said, this is a ridiculous amount of information. We're literally not even done with this topic. So it's just learn the basics. You can learn as you go. You are going to mess up. You are going to have a bioactive enclosure fail. But at the end of the day, all that means is that some plants died and maybe some isopods died.
Which is why we said at the beginning, get your foundational care on point.
Yes.
That is what's going to determine the health of your animal, your UVB, your supplements, your diet, temps and humidity, all that. But if your plants die, your animal will be fine. If your cleanup crew dies, your animal will be fine. There's no negative implications on their health and well-being.
Exactly. Like literally the definition of a bioactive enclosure failing, the worst that can happen is plants are dead, cleanup crew is dead. And then you just have to start over with those two things.
Right.
But your reptile's got to be fine.
Right.
So don't be afraid.
So just do it.
Just do it.
What's the meme where it's like, the guy was like, yesterday you said tomorrow, so just do it.
Oh, Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Be like, just do it. Yeah, that one.
Like, yesterday you said today. So just
I love that one.
do it. So that's us telling you.
Just go for it.
Just go for it.
Just go for it. Stop being afraid.
Yeah.
Just get it out there. So anywho, moving back into plants.
So the last thing we wanted to say is to get a plant LED bar.
Yeah, it's huge.
Get a
Hugely
plant
important.
light. Heat bulb UVB, in my experience, will, depending on the plant species, again, will keep your plants barely alive, but they won't grow.
Yeah, and that's
They'll
the
stay
issue.
like the same size. If you're lucky, it has to be kind of a hardy species. And again, if we're talking vertical enclosures, then that's even more difficult because then the bottom stuff's getting hardly any lighting. But if you have a plant LED bar, those suckers are
They're
game
gonna
changers.
pop off. I mean, your plants will go nuts with those things.
Also, not all LED bars are created equal.
So true. And that's coming from me who had like really subpar LED lights for so long.
I have been telling you for years to get an Arcadia Jungle Dawn because those suckers are amazing.
It's on the list for these new enclosures, okay?
They're also very expensive.
Yes. They're not cheap. Not cheap.
That's the reason why.
Yeah.
But I've had my Arcadia Jungle Dawn, going on 4 years now.
And your plants are insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild.
And granted, I've used other LED bars and have had great success with those, but I've seen your poor little LED bars.
Trust me.
I've seen other keepers. That is one thing that you do want to invest in, a high quality LED.
100%.
And we've luckily been seeing a lot of reptile brands who are coming out with stellar LEDs that are like really high quality. So I would stick with those versus like the cheaper ones you find on Amazon. Like just go with the big name brands. They know what they're doing. They're going to be pricey, but they're going to make a big difference.
And I think we've said this before, probably in our money saving tips video, but in that one, I know we said this a lot, but that's just, you don't want to skimp on those things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and if you're looking for a couple that that I've used that I can vouch for, those are listed on my shopping list on my website, and those are ones that I've personally used on all of my enclosures, my Cresties, my Chameleons, and they wouldn't be listed on there if they weren't legit. So
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'm trying to think. So
Cleanup crew.
Cleanup crew. That's the last part.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So cleanup crew, this is one of my favorite parts because I just love isopods. I love them. I actually am like really with all of my enclosure upgrades that I'm working on right now, I want to start, breeding isopods to kind of keep that steady.
So just like everything else we've been saying this entire time, not all isopods are created equal.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. There's so many different ones, and it also depends on your species.
Yep.
So for example, like you don't want to put giant canyon isopods in with a bearded dragon because they're going to get gobbled up right away.
Do you think maybe we should, so you're saying that because of the size.
Yes.
For anyone who doesn't know, those are just bigger species isopods. And so then your reptile's going to go, bug, food, and eat them. So one that's super, super common that you can find at just about any expo, any reptile shop are dwarf whites.
Yes.
Those are
They're
a
so
classic.
solid. So solid. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. So almost any reptile that has those in their enclosures won't eat them because they're too small for them to even care about. They're not, viewed as a food item.
Yeah.
And so dwarf whites are solid. They are so good.
And they're hardy.
Yes.
And they will breed and replicate
They breed
whatever.
very easily,
Yes.
very, very well, especially in those tropical environments.
Yes. The other super popular one are the orange powder, blue powder isopods.
And those in particular, I would say, are most often used in the more arid environment bioactive enclosures.
Whereas dwarf whites are typically the more
tropical.
humid. Yeah.
So definitely, if you are going the arid route for, a leopard gecko or a bearded dragon, I would definitely stick with those powder orange, powder blues, but those are great ones. There's also dairy cow isopods.
Those are cool.
I love those. Those are my favorite. For a long time, those were the only isopods that I had in all of my tropical setups. And so those are ones that also do better with like higher humidity species. But if you're really trying to get into the cool stuff, there is all kinds of designer isopods out there now. They're really cool.
The amount of money people will drop on some isopods.
It blows my mind, dude. Blows my mind.
You can spend a pretty
penny. You can spend money on isopods.
Yeah.
It's kind of
to
wild.
never see them again. Once you put
literally. It's like you see them.
your
You pretty much only see them when you feed them.
But some people keep them as pets, right? Yes, like the more designer ones, they're like intentionally trying to breed them or raise them.
Like the rubber ducky ones.
Yeah.
I love the rubber ducky ones. They're so
fun. They just also have such cool names.
I know. They're whoever is out here coming up with the isopod names, I salute you because they're pretty cute.
So something that I still don't really understand the difference is what value do isopods have versus springtails? Like why would you need both?
Honestly, I'm not 1,000% sure. So please let us know in the comments if you
this makes me feel better.
If you have a better answer to this than the one I'm about to give, please let me know in the comments. But basically, the way I have always kind of thought about it, I'm pretty sure that springtails, which you do also need, you need springtails and isopods, but springtails, I'm pretty sure eat away more at like the fungus and the mold and things like that can potentially grow in there versus I think it's the isopods that actually do the eating of the waste.
Oh, okay.
Again, I could be wrong there.
I put them both in there. And
I
did
too.
Good luck, kids. Have fun.
If anything, I'm pretty sure that even if the springtails eat away at the waste too, because I do think they eat away at the waste too, I think the benefit of some of the isopods is that the isopods eat away at more of it because they're bigger.
Yeah, so the springtails are like
microscopic
compared to the isopods. At least isopods, you can see little antennas and little legs.
Right.
Springtails, they're just like little tiny grains of rice.
The way I've always had it explained to me is that the isopods and the springtails work together to more quickly clean up all the waste.
Got it.
Which is kind of why they're always recommended to be used together.
Okay. Well, I threw them both in there, but I was like, just toss them, and I'm like, didn't really understand.
If anybody knows the specifics of what springtails eat away at versus what the isopods eat away at, please let us know. I would love to know the details. So help teach me something on that.
Is there anything else?
I'm like,
we're talked out on.
I'm spinning just from
on
that.
Bioactive.
I'm like,
just to, I guess, put a little cherry on top, there's so much information on her channel, on my channel, on the internet, on each individual piece that we've talked about.
Yes.
Just on plants, just on isopods, just on dirt. You have so much like amazing resources. You've got shopping lists. I've got shopping lists, like discount codes. Take advantage, right? And just like, at the end of the day, just go for it. Trial and error.
Yeah. See, trust me, if you can do it, if we can do it, you can do it. It is not as hard as it seems, but it does just take research and then also just going for it.
Yeah. So just making sure your basics are, that's the most important part.
Yeah.
Just get your basic care.
Cover your bases and then go from there, add what you can. You're going to do fine. We're
rooting do fine. For you.
We are. It's bioactive seems like this big, scary boogeyman thing, and it's really not, I promise.
Yeah. So those are our initial tips. Yeah. I know we both want to do future episodes on bioactive. We apparently need to do an episode just on plants. So we'll be
Literally, honestly, it's so funny. Every time we do these topics, I feel like we come up with other future topics because there's just so many directions these combos can go and like different ways we can talk about it or structure the conversation. Like it's just...
I know. We could do a whole episode just on dirt.
I know. Well, okay. If we're wrapping up the bioactive stuff, let's lighten it up because I cannot talk about
your brain as much.
It's so much. So we are going to do a little segment of smash or pass.
Smash or pass. I think the last time we did this was with Easter candy.
It was our little peeps, our whole peeps craze.
The amount of you who have DM'd me about Peeps has been the best thing I could have imagined.
Like made her life. She has loved seeing all of that feedback.
Yeah. So. Or people who've never tried Peeps, and they're like, oh, now I'm going to try them.
Now I got to try them.
Yeah. So what are we smashing? What are we passing?
We are smashing and passing PBS Kids shows.
From like the 90s, though. Yeah. 90s kid.
90s through early 2000s. Yeah. For sure. AKA the shows that we grew up with.
Yeah.
So
if you're older than that or younger than that, you may or may not know.
I don't know. I feel like these spanned a pretty wide generation. We'll see.
I did look at our age demographics, and at least 50% of our audience falls in this age range.
Beautiful.
I felt good about
I feel solid about that. Love it.
Okay.
Well, so what do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I wrote them all down. We can just go through
we can just go through that list.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We each picked about 5.
Yeah, so. I just wrote them all down. Okay, first up we've got Magic School Bus.
That's obviously a very, very, very hard smash. Hard smash.
I was Miss Frizzle for Halloween.
Like how many years in a row?
2.
Okay.
Only 2.
Still more than 1.
Well, because I had the dress and everything, so I'm not just going to wear it one time.
And the chameleons. So,
Yeah,
I
just had to make my hair curly. So, Magic School Bus, all-time favorite.
Yeah.
I've heard they're doing a remake of it. It's never going to be as good as the original. But
you can't top it. You just
that one, big smash, big fan. It's when your science teacher was like not feeling like teaching and was just like VCR,
for sure. They would wheel that TV in. Oh,
yeah, watch some days. Magic School Bus. Okay, next we've got Cyberchase.
Oh, I loved Cyberchase.
That was one of my favorites.
Smash. It was my favorite.
Did you ever play the Cyberchase like games?
Yes, obviously.
Did you play the one where you had to like fill the different like volumes?
Yes.
Of like this glass like.
I just had such a flashback into that. That was
that
crazy.
Game was so much fun.
Okay, slight deviation. This is not PBS, but did you ever play the Kim Possible game on the Disney Channel website where Rufus had to like fill
the burritos?
The naked mole rat had to fill all of the orders at the Taco Bueno
with
place.
All the burritos and stuff. Yes.
I loved that game.
Man, they don't make games like that anymore.
Talking about the volume one just made me think of that.
But
I loved that game.
That was so much fun.
Oh, we had a blast. I would sit at my computer playing that for so long.
So Cyberchase was like, now that I'm an adult thinking about this, was totally like a math show.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like the whole thing.
Yeah, I was totally teaching us math the whole time.
Wow. Look, we learned science. Yeah. We learned math.
I loved that. Cyberchase was hands down.
That was a good one.
Easy smash.
Okay, next up, we've got Zoom.
I don't even know if I remember that one.
It was the kids' cooking show. They were like live action kids, and then they had to do like these cool, like kind of like cooking sciencey project kind of things, and they're like, and they can put it in the oven, and then they're like, and this is what it looks like they would already have one already.
I genuinely don't remember that one, so that's gonna be a pass for me.
Okay, it was a smash for me because it was like, if you want to be a Zoom kid, send in your information to
it was interactive,
the PO box, whatever.
That's cool.
Well, like
a lot of them were interactive like that.
But then like you wanted to be a Zoom kid, like that was like you made it if you got to be.
That's cool
on the show.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm going to have to honestly look that one up. I don't remember that one.
And they had like a cool logo and everything. It was like very geometric.
I'm shocked.
Whatever.
I wasn't expecting there to be one I didn't know.
Well, there you have it, folks. All right. Next up, we've got Zoboomafoo.
Oh, Easy smash. Come on.
Smash.
Come on. I grew up on Zoboomafoo.
I love Zoboomafoo.
It was like a mix of Zoboomafoo, Crocodile Hunter, and Shark Week that were like my ultimate.
These are such great teaching shows now that I think about it. Because Zoom was like cooking, kitchen-y type stuff. Zoboomafoo was animals. You had the twin brother host. You had the crazy packed closet. Remember when they had like
I loved the closet.
Glow in the closet.
I loved when they had to go in the closet.
And a little vending machine where they had like the Zoboomafoo snacks or whatever.
Oh my gosh, this is bringing back so many memories. Like just
I watched
deep
a
in the
lot
nostalgia.
of TV as
I did too.
a kid.
Oh yeah.
Like,
but I will say I was a pretty hardcore like PBS and Disney Channel kid, just because my parents were like pretty strict, so I wasn't always allowed to watch the Nickelodeon shows.
Oh,
which
Fairly Odd Parents.
In light of I watched a lot of Fairly. That was one I was allowed to watch. Oh, interestingly enough. But in light of
the one where they like make fun of adults the entire time.
Yes,
it's not a great show.
in light of recent events and recent documentaries that have come out, I am a little bit grateful that my parents didn't let me watch a ton of Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I did watch a good chunk of Nickelodeon.
I did
in
some,
Cartoon Network.
Limited.
Did you do Cartoon Network?
Oh, I loved Cartoon. Okay. Well, but that was also limited. My parents were really selective about like which shows I couldn't. Not allowed to watch that. That was a definite pass of my parents.
What is the Kids Next Door?
That was one I was allowed to watch, and I was obsessed with that one. Kids Next Door, and what was we're totally going off on other tangents.
Sorry.
What was the Imaginary Friends one? Foster from Imaginary Friends. Oh, I loved that one. The little blue guy.
Man, my trivia TV right now is like
so good. So good.
All-time high right now.
Big time.
So
next.
Zoboomafoo. Smash.
Hard smash. Back to PBS.
Okay. Wishbone.
Okay. I loved that little dog.
Don't even know what it is.
Are you serious?
I only wrote it down because you said write it down. I don't know what it is.
That was hands down one of my favorite.
Not a clue.
It was this cute little brown and white dog, and he had like a little I don't know if it was an eye patch, but like a little brown circle around his eye, and he would like run around on like little adventures with kind of not the same dog but similar. I forget, it was some kind of a terrier, I think.
Okay.
But oh my gosh, he was so cute.
Did the dog talk?
He had now I'm kind of blanking.
I'm trying to understand. So far I know there's a dog. What is the dog?
I'm pretty sure that he had. I'm like actually blanking. I remember it was as like one of my hardcore favorites, but I don't remember if he talked.
I don't know if you can call it hardcore if you can't remember it.
You're right. I'm embarrassed. Oh my gosh. No, I think he talked, or at least like you heard his internal thoughts.
Okay.
I think.
Is it just the dog? Were there like other characters?
Yeah, there were other characters. There was, I think his owner was like a young boy, and they would go around and like solve like mysteries and like little detective type stuff. I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna have to look this up now. I just knew it was one of my favorites. I've never even
heard of it before today. So
man, wow. I'm gonna have to go back and watch like a little snippet of it. It's been a minute.
Okay, speaking of dogs, we have Clifford, the big red dog.
Okay, I know it's a classic, so nobody come for me, but it's a pass. That was not one that I watched religiously.
Smash.
Really?
I was a big Clifford fan.
I mean, red dog, red hair. I could see you like loving him.
I don't know. Have you seen what a baby Clifford looks like?
Oh, he was very cute.
Like a baby Snoopy.
Very, very cute.
Those two, adorable. Yes. No, we watched a lot of like Clifford growing up, like me and my siblings, and also read a lot of Clifford books.
I would say so that's I think why I'm struggling to give it a smash is because I read the books. I didn't really watch the show.
Okay.
So I think that's where like the difference for me is. It's like I was a big fan of the Clifford books, but the show...
They came out with like kind of a live action Clifford movie.
Okay, I remember seeing that.
I never watched it.
I never saw it. Yeah, I didn't watch it. Now I'll be curious.
Because I don't know, I saw the preview with like Clifford and kind of animated, but like not really. And I was like,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sometimes you don't want to like taint the memories that you have.
Ruin the original.
Yeah.
I know.
So I never watched the live action. I'm like, okay, the next generation can enjoy this. Yeah. I'm good with what I had.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel about Magic School Bus, honestly, if they bring it back. Like I'll probably watch like an episode just to see, but iffy on that one.
So Clifford's a smash for me. Okay. Arthur.
Okay, again, I know it's a classic. I did watch Arthur. I did enjoy Arthur, but I think it's going to be a pass.
I enjoyed Arthur, so I'll smash it. I watched a lot of Arthur, read a lot of Arthur books.
I think I also read more books than I did watch the show. I think I was a big big reader as a kid, like huge. And so I think a lot of these things, like there was another one that we considered putting on the list that I read all the books, but the show was average for me. So I think that's where I struggle, is I was a big reader. So
yeah, no, insane. But I also watched a ton of TV. So
I did too. So
Arthur was a smash for me. Okay, this one's a no-brainer. Dragon Tales.
Oh,
smash.
Hard smash. I literally kept a little crystal moonstone in my...
I wish with all my heart.
Literally, I kept in a little like jewelry box. I had a little like moonstone that I claimed was my dragon scale. And my cousins and I and my sister and I would like play with that. And oh my gosh. So I loved Dragon Tales.
She recently got her nails done and she's been on this chrome kick like the last 3 months. Yes. And she was like, look at my new set. And I was like, you know what that reminds me of? I said the Dragon Tales
100%
stone.
Totally.
Is it stone, scale, whatever it is.
I think it was supposed to be a scale, but it
always looked like a stone. It looked
like a giant rock. Yeah.
But I was like, that literally looks like from Dragon Tales. And you're like, oh my gosh, I love them so much more.
I almost started crying when you told me that. I was like,
that's literally what popped into my head.
I always dreamed of having my own dragon scale or dragon stone and going to Dragonland. I always dreamed of it.
I just want to know how many reptile keepers as kids were obsessed with Dragon Tales.
The Dragon Tales to Crocodile Hunter to Reptile Keeper pipeline is insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
That was just a great show.
Yeah.
There's so many characters, so many personalities.
So I liked the two-headed one. Or was it three-headed?
Twins.
Yeah, the twins. They had two heads.
It was a girl-boy,
yes,
brother-sister kind of duo.
That was my favorite one for sure.
Yeah.
And the little pink girly.
And like the big blue guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I loved them all.
Okay.
Loved them all.
We also wrote down JJ the jet plane.
Okay. This was one of mine because as a child, it freaked me out. So it's a pass.
JJ the jet plane. That's me.
The faces, the humanoid faces on
So I didn't realize how creepy it was until we were making this list. And now that I've seen them, it makes me think it was like the first step of trying to do like the Cars franchise.
I agree.
Because the Cars franchise then became like they came out the Planes movie, which is why I say franchise, right? Of like animating automobiles, basically.
That's
right?
Such a great
and
point.
Planes.
Mistakes were made with JJ the jet
Putting
plane.
a literal human resemblant face on a plane, probably not the best way.
It was creeping me out at like 12 years old. So
but it was a great show. I loved it.
I don't think I could get past the creep factor.
JJ the jet plane.
I think my brother watched it more than I did too. So I think like I was always kind of watching in the background when he had it on and I was like, that's creepy. So I think that was more my experience.
Okay, so you're a pass. I'm a smash. Yeah. There were so many other ones we could have potentially listed. We talked about Between the Lines. Mm-hmm. We talked about Out of the Box. Mm-hmm. There was Caillou. Yes. There was the Roly Poly, whatever that show was called. What was it?
I think that was Disney Channel.
Really?
Was Roly Poly?
Was that PBS?
Roly Poly. I thought it was Disney Channel. I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't know.
That to me is all clumped in at the...
There was also Redwall. That was the one that I religiously read the books as a kid. So I enjoyed when they came out with the TV show.
Reading Rainbow.
Reading Rainbow's a classic. I forget that Mr. Rogers was PBS.
Yeah.
I totally forget that. Man, PBS just had some banger TV shows for a long time.
And they're were actually, I think, beneficial.
Educational.
Right? Mm-hmm. Versus your Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel. Those are more entertainment.
There's a reason why PBS I was allowed to watch whenever I wanted. Disney Channel and Nickelodeon, I had to ask permission depending on the TV show.
Yeah, I did not have to ask permission.
I was a sheltered child, let's be honest.
I was too, but apparently not with TV. Huh. Movies, yes. Movies were restricted.
I wasn't even allowed to watch SpongeBob until I was in middle school, which was crazy.
Yeah, I was probably middle school age with
I also had a brother who was 10 years younger than me who was a little parrot and picking up on every word that was said. So that was part of the reason.
So we're both the oldest. Yeah. Not that you guys knew that about us. But that is the biggest con of being, not the biggest, but up there.
It's up there.
Is that you have to wait for your younger siblings to be old enough to watch stuff. So you can't watch stuff until they're old enough. But then they're younger than what you would have been.
And when
so
you
then
have
they get to watch
10-year age gap, that's completely unfair. My brother was 3 3 and I was 13.
Yeah.
I was like, hello.
Right.
I'm like, different demographics, different TV shows, mom and dad. Come on.
Because we were like going to watch the Spider-Man movie, and then my younger siblings are getting to watch it. And I was like, I wasn't allowed to watch this one. Yeah. But that's just how it goes, right? I totally get it. It's just as the oldest, you're like,
oh, yeah. And then when you grow up and your siblings are allowed to do crazy, ridiculous things that you were never allowed to do. Insane.
Someone's got to be the guinea pig. Someone's got to be the first one.
That's probably another reason why our friendship is so
Almost
good.
all of my friends are the oldest child.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's coincidence or what, but
interesting correlation.
Almost all of my closest friends are the oldest. Not all of them, just a good chunk of them.
Eldest
enough
daughters.
For me to like.
Eldest daughters, man. We've got a lot on our shoulders.
Yep. Well, there you go. It has nothing to do with reptiles.
Literally nothing.
Nothing to do with bioactive.
But we hope you got a little good nostalgia, though.
But we needed like something light and fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The bioactive topic can just be so like excruciating.
Which is something we're both passionate about and enjoy talking about and teaching and learning.
Yeah.
Just trying to condense it into a podcast episode. You're like, okay.
We were literally sitting there like, how are we going to squeeze all this in?
Yeah. I feel let us know.
Yeah.
If there's like specific topics you want us to expand on, we're happy to do that. But also recognize that this podcast is not a care specific podcast. So there's tons of amazing resources where people have taken the time to get into the nitty gritties. You have that on your channel. I have that on my channel. For the podcast, we do want to try and keep it more like
we want to make sure that everybody's included and that everybody's species are covered and everybody can join in on the convo.
Right, which is why I want to try and talk about bioactive like
in a general sense.
Tips and tricks for anyone who's trying to get started. Yes. Then you can take that, run with it, and apply it to your species.
But if you have other ideas for bioactive specific topics, let us know because we will probably do more episodes on it.
Oh, for sure.
So. But I think that wraps us up for the day.
Wrap it up. Yeah, right. I feel good.
Well, the usual spiel. Follow us on all the socials. That's where you guys will get all the updates. Anytime we decide to do live episodes, it will always be posted on our socials.
Yep.
And send us voice memos, leave us reviews, subscribe, do all the things.
And then make sure you're following both of us individually. Yeah. You can find me at Neptune the Chameleon.
Listless Lizards.
And then you'll find us, like, I'll be doing my full bioactive enclosure build content. You've got all your stuff. You've
got lots of enclosures coming up.
So follow us there, tag along. You might get some inspo for your bioactive enclosures.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'll catch you in the next episode, guys.
We'll see you later.